This might be hard to watch, but I promise it's worth it. Meet Mark.
My first 5 years, I grew up in Butte County. And then after my mom passed, the 3 younger brothers got adopted out. So I grew up 7 to 21. I was in the Bay Area.
For years, Mark lived without a home in Northern California.
And then my adopted mom, she passed away. Because I remember having my 10th birthday. We went to Magic Mountain. So she died sometime after that.
Like everyone you'll see in this film, life has handed Mark maybe more than his fair share of challenges.
I stayed with my adopted father, and then he got remarried. Yeah, I ain't really too much to say about him, so. First time I went to the streets was being kicked out from his house when I lived in Oakland. From there, I caught a juvenile assault, but I didn't have to do no time on it. I spent a week in jail until I went to court, and then I went back home for about a year or so. But when I was 21, my adopted brothers found me, located me, and I talked to them on a Sunday, and I was out here October, it was 92. I've been an old soul, so I don't really like drama.
As you can see, Mark had a rough start, but in his 20s, he turned things around and got what most of us yearn for.
I got with my kid's mom in 92. We separated in 99. Then we got back together in 2006, and then got married in 2007, and she passed away in 2012. Well, she actually killed herself, but on our son's 16th birthday. So after that happened, I tried to get me and my son from a 4-bedroom to like something smaller. Rental people wouldn't do it. I've been homeless since May 4th, 2012.
I met Mark doing this documentary about people living with homelessness. And, you know, without any real thought, I slotted him into the homeless man category in my mind. Of course, hearing his story, my heart went out to him. But in all honesty, I didn't think we had a ton in common. Then he started talking about his son.
I was on a leash. We were on a leash. All she had to do was take us from a 4-bedroom to a 1-bedroom, but well, you don't have income. You got thrust out here. And I told my son, I was like, well, we're gonna be homeless. And he said, well, I just don't want to go to CPS. I said, okay. So once it came to light that we were gonna be in our Durango, I had to get him somewhere he could be inside and he wouldn't miss school and stuff like that. So I had to separate from him so he could, his life didn't get interrupted any more than it already was. At the time, he was at Chico High, and he was playing JV football, and he was dating, his girlfriend was a JV coach's daughter. So I just went over there one day and said, hey, push come to shove, could you take the weekend? So he don't go, and they said, we'd love to. And I'm not giving my son up, I'm trying to do the best thing for him instead of him going to CPS. And I think that's all fathers dream for their children, to just have a better life.
I'll level with you. I don't know what in the blazes I make of what you're about to see. Last year, the makers of this film, an artist, a radio broadcaster, and a filmmaker, that's me, began it as a documentary about homelessness from a different point of view. Rather than coming at it as journalists, academics, activists, social workers, we decided to get to know those living with homelessness as we would anyone else in our lives. For us, that meant meeting socially for art, writing, and simply talking. And yes, I know how that sounds. But bear with me. What it's become is less clear to me. Rumination on where we are in California right now? Something like the original idea? Or is it an introduction to a group of people much nearer to me than I believed? I don't know. I do know, if you're like me, you won't see what you expect. Because something right in front of me was making it hard to see what's right in front of all of us.
I lived in a really pretty house on the Esplanade that said Chico all over it. It used to be a bed and breakfast right across from the mansion, and I mean, you could sit on that front porch and watch the leaves change, and this is Chico. It was nice.
I was born in San Mateo, and my mom was 19, my dad was 20, and my mom left my dad when I was just a baby. He was a truck driver. When I was 8, I found out he wasn't my biological father. The way he went about it was just very weird. Like, he came in, he said, call this number, and it was my Nana's phone number, and he's like, I'm not your dad. So I grew up very confused about my childhood.
I was born in Port St. Lucie. I only remember a little bit from my childhood from there, and that's around the time that I was old enough to understand the abuse that my brothers were facing and the neglect that I was facing in my own home. From the jump, just right into foster care. In foster care, I experienced a lot of things that a child should not experience. I was sexually assaulted by my brothers, and eventually some form of abuse, verbally, mentally, and actually physically. So everything I experienced with my mother, I experienced in foster care.
So my mother, like my bio mother, has been addicted to meth since she was 14 years old. My dad, he's a deceased. My mother was very abusive physically. We had lived in a small town called Berry Creek, and the bear fire went through, and we were in the same home for like 12 years, and we lost that home.
Yeah, for me, I have never viewed like going down the path of like drugs and alcoholism as like an option, because I saw how that tore my mom apart, how it ruined her life. Like, she lost all of her kids because of it.
This is Deborah, Kristen, Faith, Katrina, and Aria. One way or another, like Mark, they have all lost the homes they knew.
We were stuck in Motel 6 for 7 months. Obviously, through that time, like without my dad, my mother like got heavier for her, and it like got a lot harder for all of us.
How I got here, I had a job, and the lady sold the business, and prior to that I had been getting ill all the time for 2 years, on and off. But I mean, I didn't lose time from work, because I couldn't lose time from work. There were no other employees there but me. She wasn't in the area, she depended on me, and I went to work, and I did the job no matter how long it took. So when she sold, of course I needed another job and things, but the new owner didn't really hire me. I had to pay rent, which was not a problem. I had some money stocked up. My landlady passed away though. So it was like one thing after another. I went and stayed at Safe Space at night, and then wandered around during the day and tried to stay well, but I was sick for the entire month of February. When they closed the shelter down that they had open at night, Safe Space, because they don't keep it open when the weather gets warmer, you know. So what am I gonna do? They're giving out tents and sleeping bags, and the other folks that are there are saying, this is where we're gonna go. We're gonna camp in these places, and this will probably get you in faster than anywhere else. I'm going downtown, in the middle of downtown. That's where they pitched me a tent.
Homeless is the correct term, in my opinion. When you're homeless, oh, you have no money, you don't have no clothes to support you, know, stuff like that, which is incorrect. It's literally in the word, homeless. Like, you're homeless, you have no home. To be honest with you, even when I had a home with my mom, it wasn't really a home. So it could be another thing to it too. You can even have a place to stay, but it may not feel at home, because it's not something for you, tangible, you know? I was taken out of my home at the age of 5 and then 7. So I literally became homeless.
My life, I felt complete when I had my son. Oh, it gets me choked up. It's one of the best times of my life, but their father was an addict, and I was trying to hide it when I shouldn't have, because in the end, that's why I don't have my kids. I've been homeless twice after I lost my kids.
My mother bought a tiny motorhome after they cleared everything out. We moved back up to our old property, and then our landlord had kicked us off because our lease said like we were renting the housing, not the property. We ended up squatting on the property for about 2 years. My mom, she got caught stealing chainsaws from another property, and the cops came up, and we had no running water, we had no septic, no electricity, like we were just stuck on top of a hill. Like I had been sleeping outside of the motorhome because my mom wouldn't let me in. She was paranoid that people were stealing, so I was sleeping on a couch outside. And when I was 13, I was put into foster care.
In California, homelessness is never very far from our minds. It's a problem that seems forever frozen, never getting better, often seeming to get worse. But how many of us really know what it's like to live without a home? Those of us who have never lived it are often quick to judge. But how quick are we to truly know the reality of those going through it?
Something I think that people don't realize when you don't experience homelessness is you never feel like you belong anywhere. You never feel like you're wanted anywhere, and you always feel like a burden.
It's not, some people have I'm not gonna live free out here. No, man, this ain't not freedom. You know what I mean? You're free, but you're not really free, because you go anywhere, you looked at it a certain way.
And I was scared at first, and I was like, I can't believe what these people are saying and what they're asking people, and they're knocking on tents, and they'd be asking for money, they'd be hollering and fighting with one another, they'd be asking for drugs, they'd be wanting to use, you got a lighter and stuff, and it's like, dude, you'd hear glass break at night, and you'd see the shadows going by from the lights on the bicycles, the shopping carts, the roller skating, the motorcycles that would go on.
You never feel safe anywhere.
The hate that people show, I mean, people go around town and throw bottles at us.
At one point, that was a thing, to attack the homeless people and stuff like that. That was bad. People drive around in trucks, they wait for them, they find them, follow them, and attack them.
It's a struggle. It really is a struggle. I feel like being a female is the worst, being on the streets, because there's a lot of people in this world that are not, they're just not healthy. They're not like safe. Let's put it like that, safe is the best word to say. We're young, we're looking for stability, we're looking for sources of income, we're looking for food, shelter. So if we're really vulnerable, we're looking for those things. Anybody that has it, we want it. It's a lot of people. We have sex trafficking to this day.
It was scary sometimes, lonely, frustrating. I was angry with myself. It was a lot of self battling with myself about, I didn't blame nobody else. It was nobody else's fault. It was just, but I felt like I didn't have nobody. You know what I mean? Like I had no family. I was so embarrassed. I didn't want nobody to know. So I tried not to look homeless. I was very clean, but you know, I still felt it was just rough. It was very hard, very hard.
When people at school found out that I was in foster care, and like at the time I was like 2nd grade, a lot of my friends like wanted nothing to do with me. My teachers were like treating me as if I was like a broken little doll, and it kind of like was like crazy because suddenly like people I'd known like from kindergarten to 2nd grade, like they were acting as if they didn't know me, and it was like the only thing that's changed is where I'm living.
You can't sleep properly because you don't know who's coming. You're cold, you're on something hard. Ask a successful person what it's like if you don't get 1 or 2 good nights sleep. We can't function the next day. So okay, you're not getting any good sleep anytime, anywhere. So right there, how are you making choices? How's your temper? How's your attitude? How friendly does the world look?
Because it's something that will change you, and it's horrible to lose everything. It's just horrible not to have a door to lock or being a female and having, I mean, I can't say men aren't scared to sleep on the streets either, but to like legitimately try to go to sleep. And I sleep pretty hard, and you don't know what's happening while you're sleeping, and it's just scary. It's just nobody should be homeless.
You don't sleep as well there because of the noise and the fear that anybody can slice your tent or set it on fire on you. I mean, they're really cutthroat out there. A lot of people are. They will steal from you. They will come right and sit down and look at you to your face and take from you.
You're hungry, so you're not giving your body the nutrients it needs.
Didn't have any. I had nothing really solid to. Didn't have a woman. Didn't really have. I don't have any close friends because they just having true friends out here is kind of a myth.
I did sneak into some places, like in some private neighborhoods, and I would sneak to like places where I could just maybe rest and just cry and cry and cry. And I remember this one time I went to this place that was basically just developing. It wasn't really fully developed. There's a piece of land. I remember just going there and laying, but I always was so scared because there's a stigma like, oh my gosh, there's a homeless person in my community, like call 911, like they're probably not up to no good. I was just trying to avoid cars. I would always try to avoid cars. Like if a car came, I put my head down, look like I'm just nobody, basically. But I was always afraid of sleeping by myself because nobody should sleep by themselves, especially as a girl.
You can't just take off during the day to do something because all your things are there, a majority of them. You're going to take some things with you, a backpack full or a rolling suitcase or something, but you're going to leave your other things there and take turns watching. Somebody has to be at the site that's going to sit there and watch the tents to make sure that nobody's going to break into them. And you're wandering around with carrying your personal belongings, the things that you value the most, whether it be, for me it was my paperwork, my ID, whatever I had there, and toting that everywhere. They asked me if I had a bomb when I got on the bus one day, what's in your metal case? And it's all my documents, my doctor work, my medical work. And it's cold, it's windy, the storm came by and the tent was laying over on the top of me and I'm thinking it's gonna blow me away.
That little bridge right there, that it's like right across from Annie's Glen. When you first go into Annie's Glen, I stayed under that bridge whenever I was homeless because I just felt safe under there. And I kept it really clean. And yes, it did flood. Yes, they let out 1 mile. Unfortunately, I can no longer really go down there and sit under that bridge and kind of like be like, wow, look around, look how far I've come, because August of 2020, I knew that they were gonna let out 1 mile. I just had a feeling they were gonna empty it for that summer. And so I had woken up and I'm like, man, it's just still too early. It was really still too early. I'm like, I'm gonna lay down for 5 more minutes. And the next thing I remember is waking up, literally getting sucked underwater, like my whole tent filled up with water. And then I was being drugged down the frickin' creek in my tent until it ripped open and I got out of it. And thank God it was summertime. Thank God it was in the middle of August, but I had no shoes on and shouldn't have went to sleep for that extra 5 minutes. And that was like the last time I really stayed under there.
I heard that opinion that we want to be out there. Not all of us. And the ones that claim they do, they don't. You know, there's nothing like going to your bathroom, having a kitchen, having, something over your head that's more stable than this. Camping is cool, man, if you go on the weekends or for like a week vacation, but just being out here, it's not a good idea.
I worked for a laundromat here in Chico. I mean, I've been there for over 18 years. Strange things happen when you're out there. I mean, I recognized a lady when I was in a public restroom and I had my suitcase with me, so I'm carrying everything around it. And she didn't want her daughter to go into the bathroom because there was a homeless person there. I waited on her. For many years, she was a customer in the store I worked in. I bought her daughter ice cream her first day of kindergarten. And the woman's telling her daughter what a bad person I am. It's like the daughter's looking at me. She's more than 8 years old right now. But she's looking up at me and she knows me. She recognizes my face. Lady only looked as far as my waist, a little higher, and that was it. I'm holding a suitcase. I'm a homeless person. I'm a drug addict. I'm a thief. All these things I can imagine running through her head. So the things she's telling her daughter are those things. It's like, wait a minute, I waited on you for many years. You left your daughter alone with me so you could go do something else, pick up another child when she's watching your laundry. I mean, you trusted me and knew me, and you never looked at my face to see who I was.
It's very scary, and people need to not be so naive and think that it couldn't happen to them, because it honestly could. I don't wish it upon anybody. I honest to gosh don't.
Homelessness can happen to anyone. It's a theme I've heard all my life. You've probably heard it too. I don't know if you're like me, but I never really believed it. Aria, Kristen, and Cecilia condensed it down into forms I think we've all heard.
People assume that it's because, you wanted to be homeless or you were a drug addict, and that's not necessarily the case.
It seems like really people stereotype homeless people as like, they're on the streets because they're not trying to get off the streets. Like I've heard my own mom, say like my adopted mom, I have to like say no, like sometimes they just don't have a means to get off the streets, because if they go and trying to get a job, but at the interview they like don't have clean clothes or they don't smell nice, they're gonna be like, but without the money they can't get like clean. So like it's kind of like a never-ending hole, and then drugs get involved and they're like pretty easy access on the streets.
It's just like, I wish everybody understood that it could happen to you at any point in time. I lost my place because I lost my job. Like, everybody's different, and it's even more scarier now as I get older to realize that homelessness is, anybody can be homeless. You're one fire, one catastrophe. You just never know. The pandemic, look when that happened, you know what I mean?
I used to think no set of circumstances on earth could take me and my family to homelessness. But listening to these interviews, two themes emerged that looked very familiar and rattled my confidence: fate and trauma. Combined with my own experiences, I couldn't be sure it was my work and my determination alone that would keep me and those I loved secure. After all, I had seen homelessness from the inside. What you're looking at right now is Paradise, California, exactly 100 days before it was consumed in a disaster that had more in common with a war than a wildfire. Until November 8th, 2018, my family and I lived in Paradise on Scottwood Road. Around 6:30 that morning, a poorly maintained PG&E power line, thanks PG&E, fell from a transmission line into brush made bone dry by one of California's frequent droughts. By noon, I was homeless. So were my sons and their mother. The home we had made was ashes, along with the homes of about 30,000 of our fellow North State neighbors. In the months after the fire, I interviewed a World War II vet who had toured the wreckage that had once been the homes of my friends and family. He said it reminded him precisely of Tokyo after the firebombing, and the only thing worse he had witnessed was Hiroshima in the weeks after the atomic bombing.
I was genuinely scared my mother was going to end up killing me because she had attempted to many times. When I was little and like through all of that, my focus was to just make it through the day rather than what's next. So I never had a plan because for like many years I genuinely thought I wasn't gonna make it out of there.
It's just scary. I wish people didn't have to know about homelessness. I wish it wasn't a thing, but it is.
You know, we have to remember that we are people with nervous systems, and when you have experienced, I'm going to speak about women, when you've experienced a sexual assault trauma from living on the street, when your health is so poor from living in the environments you're living in, and when you're so degraded, you can't possibly make decent choice. I mean, we would accept if someone had cancer or a diabetic emergency or something. We would accept that they weren't in an health crisis emergency. They're not capable of going to work. They're not capable of making some kind of choices because they are in such a crisis health-wise. They can't make choices. So how can you expect these people living on the street? This is a health emergency. They're in a health emergency.
But I didn't realize the extent of how bad it had been or how bad my mom's abuse had been until I was in foster care and was able to start processing it. So my whole brain survival thing was just make it through the day. So I never thought about what I would do next.
We've all seen it with our own lives. Our ambition is to face hardship with a stiff upper lip. But privately, how many of us face it with a stiff drink or something else? What happens when losses pile up like a bad run at a roulette table? My time after the fire was immensely painful, but we managed. My boys were resilient. But just as we were finding our feet again, an illness from China upended everything and returned us to a life of unknowns and constant stress and worry. For us, enough was enough. A crushing depression consumed everyone in my family, and and if I happened to prefer drinking or drugs, my life would have been permanently damaged with the amount of self-distraction I was attempting. I had an apartment I could still afford. Several I knew began to battle addictions that may end them. I myself am diabetic, so the junk food that I ate to comfort would not lead to an overdose, but it would shorten my days for sure. And I knew this all even as I did it. But it was the pain today I was desperate to escape. Through the stress, trauma, and depression, my decision-making became impulsive, and I found managing my life difficult. But I had a safety cushion built up of my family, friends, and funds. So the idea of turning to some temporary distraction became much less theoretical. I felt myself one step closer to the experiences I once could not have imagined sharing. Re-listening to these interviews through the lens of that experience, it became clear how much the experiences of Mark, Deborah, Kristen, Katrina, and Faith were scattered among my own, and maybe yours. Trauma from disaster I shared with Faith. I shared a scorching pain I was desperate to escape with Kristen. Love for my kids I shared with Mark, all wrapped with unfortunate turns of fate as seen with Deborah. How fate played a part saving me from the streets became clear. When we lost our home, we had co-workers who stepped in to provide temporary shelter. We had insurance money. We had a network of family and friends. Each one proved essential for us to get back on our feet. But what if my family had been like Faith's and could not provide the support and security needed? What if I had a smaller social circle, like Mark, and didn't have the help of so many friends? What if the work issues that faced Deborah found me at just the wrong time? What if my distraction of choice was alcohol rather than ice cream? Each one of these I could probably manage, but a string like the campfire and COVID produced them all at once, over and over. With each given to me by fate, I barely made it through. Being honest with myself, the hand fate played was much larger than I'd ever believed. Consider all this when I bring you back to Mark. As admiring as I was of a father finding a home other than his own for the good of his kid, what kind of person would let things get to that point? As it turns out, my kind of person, namely my great-grandparents. In the 1930s, the parents of my grandfather on my father's side sent him to live with relatives to keep him from suffering the worst of the Great Depression, as they did what they could to survive. And on my mother's side, my grandmother's parents sent her to live with an aunt to keep her from homeless poverty as they scrambled to survive. Outside of my great-grandparents' control, financially, they could not provide for my grandparents. Outside of my control, I lost my home. Of course, my experiences were different than Deborah or Mark or Faith's. But could I say they were so different I could point to what kept my steps through life, or those of my kids, on a path different from theirs? And if I was confident in my ability to control fate, checking on my own family's past revealed fate took the wheel from some of the most hardworking and capable people I had met. I literally would not be here if it weren't for members of my family making exactly the heartbreaking choice Mark did. So for me, that means having more understanding going forward. After all, what once seemed like a clear difference did not look clear anymore.
You know, I saw one of your questions was, what was something good from coming from being on the street? Nothing good.
This is Cecilia. We've already met her, but let's catch up with her story.
I live with my cat. And that's how I plan on spending the rest of my life, is living with my cat and taking care of myself. I grew up in foster care, and coming out of foster care, I didn't have anywhere to go. So I ended up getting married and married and married and married as a way, I think, of wanting that family that I never had, but also wanting people to take care of, but also not feeling I could take care of myself.
With Mark, I understood just how close I was to those living homeless. Cecilia's story makes something else clear.
Growing up the way I did, being bounced around foster homes, and then bouncing around marriages, bouncing around on the streets, I'll never feel like I'm enough to be here. I'll never feel like I'm enough to be anywhere. I don't think I'll ever really feel that I'm wanted anywhere.
For all the talk in popular culture about division and strife, humans are among the most social animals alive. There's a reason we're called the social primates. So when we live in the social stigma of homelessness, we find ourselves in a strange existence far from modern life.
It's a bad label to have on you. It is bad, because when you go into the stores, you're going to get followed.
They're people. We're people. We bleed the same blood. We cry the same tears. You know what I'm saying? We're all human beings.
When we see people living on the street, what is it we're really witnessing?
Food, beds, and showers, and not in an environment that's going to put more stress on the situation.
When we see those living in homelessness in our state, we see an experience that has more in common with the 19th century than the 21st. Granted, that may sound strange to hear. So let's sit with Cecilia, Deborah, and everyone else to see not what activists or politicians say about living in homelessness, but what the experience is like for those living through it. Let's take Cecilia's outlook: food, shelter, sleep. What is it like to deal with these while homeless? And what's it like to deal with as someone we might think of as a typical person? In our day-to-day thinking, it's fair to say we think of a typical person as someone with a place to live, a car for travel, a job for money, with at least a high school education, and with no major addiction or mental health issues. Yes, that asterisk is doing a lot of work. And of course, this is not everyone's experience, but obviously no experience is everyone's. Now, let's compare that typical person's day to the day-to-day events with someone that has exactly the same experience, same self-motivation, same clear mind, same education, but who's homeless. What is a typical day like? What's it like running errands? How do you plan for the future and build a life that hopefully gets you off the streets? How does that day start? With the night before, of course, namely sleep.
I'm not gonna lie, it's hard as heck. It really is. I remember wondering when I was gonna eat, where I was gonna sleep.
We were right on the corner, and there was 5 tents on a little corner of the lawn. We doubled up it because it was safer that way. It was like really kind of scary, because you could hear these people just making all kinds of noise, and it's echoing through there. And then you'd hear the sirens, and you'd hear all kinds of noises. And then you could see the lights lighting up out there. And it was like, ow. You'd fall asleep, and then you'd hear something to wake you up. Sometimes there'd be somebody that would be going, they'd fall into your tent, and you'd be, oh, this is not good. I'm going to sleep on the other side next time.
Because I'm a woman and I didn't want to sleep. You know, I was scared to sleep because I'm a deep sleeper.
I'm a single female. Right. Where are you going to go? You don't want to go into the parks. They're dangerous, and I know they're dangerous at night. Right. You don't want to go in by the water. We'd had rains and people had flooded, and the tents go down the creek way. I don't want to be somewhere tucked in the bushes where there's bugs and, you know. We have lions, we have bears out there in Upper Park. We have snakes in the grass. I mean, I don't want to be where something like that. I'm not into spiders, I'm not into mice, I'm not into rats. I just don't get into those. And the last thing I want to do is get bit by something. I'm thankful I have this huge big dog in there with me, and he's going to bark when somebody comes by, and he is scary. We had, we had 2 dogs where we were at, and the 6 tents. And then we We take turns. There usually be two or three people sitting at the site all the time.
So there's Deborah on the street, looking for sleep, using dogs to keep alert for threats, like a tribe, guarding against bears, lions, and other people. In that case, it makes sense to have people watch out against those threats in shifts, like an army on the front, stealing some rest before the next attack. So sleeping while homeless is truly like living rough in the wild, or like a soldier in war. Now, let's take a look at that typical person again, with the typical bed. Not the decor or how it might sit in your home's layout. I mean the literal bed, the mattress, the walls, the door and its lock, and the heat in the air. 8 hours of sleep is recommended. Some of us take pride in getting only 6. But even then, how many of us sleep in on Saturdays to catch up? Bad sleep means chronic fatigue. That makes learning difficult, creates a constant fogginess, impairs memory, and slows reaction time. Think about your life. What was your parents' mood when they didn't get any sleep for a night or two? How about your kid? How is your spouse's mood as they battle insomnia? Now ask, how would it be to manage your job, your relationships, your responsibilities when you haven't had a meaningful sleep in 6 months? And how's your health?
So I never got to rest. I was always go, 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 which probably led to the reason why I got sick.
The rain's coming inside your tent. It's like, this is no way, no wonder I'm sick now. I'm going to get sicker.
Your nervous system, when you're constantly under attack, you're under threat, you're not safe, your mind's out here, 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 here. You're not here.
Talking to Deborah and Cecilia about health, they revealed a staggering barrier to modern life. Let's call it the time tax. But it doesn't start with time, but with movement. Let's take that typical person again. They're feeling sick and need to go to the doctor. When you have a car, running to an appointment across town can take 10 minutes. Then let's say 45 minutes for the appointment, 20 minutes to get to the pharmacy and pick up some medicine, then 5 minutes to get home to rest and recover. So from start to finish, let's say 90 minutes, an hour and a half. Now let's look at the same task while homeless, or rather, without a car. The travel time on the bus between waiting, transfers, and walking time from where you sleep to the stop and from the final stop to the doctor's office could take an hour and a half itself. Then let's say that same 45 minutes for the same appointment, then an hour by bus to the pharmacy, then another 30 minutes back to home base, which is a tent where you try to recover and get some kind of rest. What a car makes possible at a relaxed 90 minutes could take 250 to 300 minutes without a car or home. That's half a workday or more on just this one errand.
I have a great job. I wake up, my throat's sore. I call into work and stay in bed. What do you do when you're homeless and you wake up and you, not just your throat sore, but you have some real serious issues going on?
I get vertigo. Being out on the streets in Chico, I had vertigo one day and I have to keep moving. You can't sit down a lot. They want you to keep moving, except when you stay at your little tent site. But I wanted to go to the store and I was having trouble getting up and down the curb. I was dizzy and the officer thought I was drunk. And he's going, I need to call the authorities on you. And I'm, no, I'm just having a little trouble. I have vertigo. And he's going, I don't know anything about that. But I said, well, I can explain it to you, or you can look at this paperwork I have in my pocket. But he was going to call the officers to pick me up because he thought I was drunk in public.
It's such a huge, huge impact on your life.
About a year before the fire, my wife at the time was in a car wreck. It resulted in vertigo and soft tissue injuries so debilitating she could not walk without the risk of falling or throwing up. Her doctor recommended bed rest until the symptoms hopefully passed. With us, she had a safe bed, a refrigerator to keep food, a clean and safe bathroom, and 25 feet to walk between them all. Thinking of anyone trying to heal with only a bench or a concrete bed, with the consistent need to keep moving, with no place to store food or meds safely seems like an ungodly task.
That was the other thing, is you've got to buy ice all the time. It gets expensive trying to eat out or make cold food or keep it cold. You get ice that's half melted or remelted back, and you're bringing this stuff in to put in your ice chest.
And that's something else. A lot of modern medicines, including some of the medicines I take to keep my diabetes at bay, require refrigeration. So in addition to difficulty keeping food safe, homelessness makes it extremely difficult to keep modern healthcare on track. So that's sleep, that's travel, that's time, that's health, at least physical health.
But for the most part, it was just lonely, and it's like a loneliness that you just feel like if you died, well, who would know? Like, what would happen to you? Like, it's just a deep, heart-wrenching, just like, it's like the second is closest thing to when I've lost my kids. It was like you just feel just like nothing. You don't feel, you just feel like a body walking around, like just trying to make it.
So strength is required when you're homeless. You know, I'm a Christian. Why did God have to do all these things? I gave you my life. You never said it was gonna be easy, but why did you just do this to me so quickly? Me and him are not like seeing eye to eye. I don't feel like I'm resilient. I'm just having to deal with the cards that I dealt with, and I don't want to deal with them.
Like if you have a backpack, you're homeless. A lot of people would yell, get a job.
A job. Get a job. It's simple advice. There's a truism that everything can be solved with enough money. So getting money from a job seems pretty straightforward. And on one level, it's a good and true suggestion. But let's look at our typical person preparing for a job interview. You put on your best clothes. You talk to your friends about responding to possible interview questions. You get good sleep so you can be alert and focused. Now, imagine walking into that interview after 3 months of homelessness, trying to impress a potential employer when you haven't slept well in half a year. How clean are your clothes when you have no closet to store them in and have to carry them to and from a public laundry, then bring them back to store in a tent or bag? How's your energy? How's your aspect? Do you think an interviewer would assume what they see comes only from a lack of sleep? If this is what they see you represent at a job interview, how likely is it that they'll hire you to represent their business or organization? Not an impossible task to land a job, but let's be honest in saying it's a higher hurdle to clear without a home.
I mean, if you go for a job, I have a job. I have a great job. And I don't tell anyone I'm homeless, because right there, it puts me in a kind of separate space.
Okay, you got yourself into this boat, now you got to get yourself out. Since I'd been constantly go, do, all at the same time, they just kept happening, and it was like you can't pull out of one to go to the other one. Yeah, it was a lot. I'm grasping at straws. What am I going to chase after a job today? I'm going to chase after a place to live today. You know, each day it's something different I'm chasing, thinking something's going to break. But you're changing your location where you're at. You're not always charging your cell phone so you can't answer it all the time. I used to sit out there with a solar panel, try and solar panel my phone, keep that going.
When talking about homelessness in California, sooner or later, public assistance comes up. And it makes sense. Our taxes pay to provide them. And after all, isn't California famous for handouts? So we may have the notion that there are government and nonprofit organizations existing to help those living homeless find jobs, places to live, get food, mental and medical care, clothes, and life skills. So what's it like to live with those programs? If they're so great, why is it that there's still so much homelessness? We all know what it's like to go to the DMV to get a driver's license. You are required to have some form of ID, a passport, social security card, a utility bill with your current address, all of which you usually keep safe at home. So you prove who you are, and now you fill out forms and wait to talk to a clerk. It can take hours from start to finish, all to get or renew your license. For getting public assistance, it's the same. It requires being there in person, typically at a county or state office. Once you're there, you're again required to prove your ID, again with a driver's license, passport, or birth certificate. But now you have to keep them on your person, eating, moving, and sleeping with them, just to make sure they're not lost. So it becomes obvious why those living in homelessness carry so much. There are forms to fill out and an interview process with a care worker. There, you'll need to answer intimate questions about your life, how you found yourself homeless, and how you're hoping this assistance will help you out of your situation. Applying combines all the intimate and embarrassing parts of going to the doctor with the bureaucratic maze of the DMV. But here's the thing. Each program, assistance for food, for rent, for clothes, for medical and mental care, all require a similar process.
You have to have your social security card, your birth certificate, you're applying for housing, but I don't have any income. Who's going to take me? I'm getting on the waiting lists. You just have to stay on top of it all, and when you've got so many different directions to go at once, it's like, well, I'm going to do this one day, and I'm going to try this one on Tuesday, and one day you'd want to work looking for a job, then the next day you want to work looking for a house.
So imagine having to go through a DMV process for every aspect of your life. The travel time, form filling time, meeting time, assuming everything works out well the first time, takes as much time, at least for a few weeks, as a full-time job. Yes, these assistances are free to participants. Yes, it's fair to do some checking on those asking for public money. But combine the time tax for travel, time for forms, time for approval, time to correct bureaucratic mistakes, free services literally are a full-time job for those attempting to use them. All these needs in the same hours where we expect and hope for people living in homelessness to be looking for jobs and looking for a place to live off the street.
You know, we look at homelessness like, oh, they have drug and alcohol problems, oh, they're poor, all these things. But it's so much more complex as far as like the systems, you know, that prevent housing opportunities for people.
So we come to housing. We've talked about the nuances and challenges of poverty. We've talked about determination, drive to work, and better ourselves against the background of being homeless. Now, we arrive at the question that decides who's homeless and who's not. Namely, getting a place to live in California. Given the changes in rent, the changes in interest rates, the changes in population pressures, the challenge of getting housing for those even with good jobs and a respectable rental or mortgage history has been daunting. For those starting the search without a home, the hurdles to clear can be even more difficult. Deborah knows firsthand.
I'm living at the pallet houses in Chico. They renamed it to the Genesis Shelter, and it's a place where when you don't have a home, don't go in a tent, don't be sofa-sofing, come out here and they'll try and guide you somewhat to getting back on your own feet. They provide meals and showers, a nice, safe, warm place with a heater, electricity, keep your phone charged or whatever, and I've been here a long time, 18 months, but I mean, it takes a while to get out when you have no income.
To talk about the challenges of getting a home after you've been homeless, it might be illustrative to talk about how Cecilia became homeless in the first place. She was living in a studio apartment, renting privately from a man with a few small, similar properties.
And so I rented one, and I think it was $775 for just a little studio, and that included my utilities. And about 6 months in, he decided to sell and move. So he sold that to a developer who went through a property management rental. And as soon as they moved in, they upped the rent, and there's a cap on how much you can up the rent. But my rent had included my utilities, but they upped it the percentage of that, and then they added utilities on. So I went from paying $775 to over $1,000, just immediately, right there, just from going from a private owner to the property management. And that was when I couldn't afford to stay. This is a large issue.
Obviously, no one film can convey or answer all the complexities and challenges of homelessness. That being said, Where does all this leave us?
I would like to say that I appreciate people for listening, because I think that's going to be our first solution for even considering how we're going to come out of that. It's to really listen to people rather than assume that we know what people need or assume that we know what services people need. You know, this isn't going to be a solution where the people in power decide what the less fortunate need. This is where the less fortunate are going to be able to be empowered. We need to bring them into the solution rather than trying to force a solution on them that doesn't work.
What I want is people to drop the, oh, she was a homeless person, or she lived at that shelter out there. They've already looked at me and already got an idea of who I am before they even see who I am. You need to look at the person.
You know, just because somebody's homeless, that don't mean that they're a bad person. I like to phrase that it's homeless is a situation, not a disease, because that's all it is.
Well, I can tell you when I started my job, you know, I was staying with a friend. And it wasn't long after that, before that situation became intolerable. I was at work one day crying. I had coworkers come, oh, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my cat. I don't know where I'm gonna go. And you know, the pity, you know, and also kind of like a distrust that maybe I wasn't the reliable person they thought I was, you know, or maybe I'm not the put together person, you know, that they had thought I was. So I tried to be quiet about it because I was new to my job and I didn't want, you know, on a probationary period, I was afraid that my supervisors would realize, boy, this isn't somebody we want around that can't even keep a home.
Just going through life is pretty much what I'm doing. I feel like I struggle sometimes. Sometimes I feel insecure financially. That's why I want to get a job. You know, being a full-time student is great and all, but sometimes you want some income in your pocket, and a lot of places here are not really hiring part-time, they're hiring full-time. And I got to understand what my therapist was saying when she said I'm resilient, because I learned that I truly am. I can fall down on my feet and I can get back up.
And it's not the community's job to take care of us. That's what people need to remember too, that are homeless. That I feel like people that are homeless tend to forget that. They tend to feel like it's the community's job to help them. I wish we could all just work together. I wish we could, you know, like when the campfire happened, everyone pulled together. Like, I don't know, times are just changing, so it's scary. It's just very scary.
So, we have met Faith, Aria, Mark, Katrina, Kristen, Deborah, and Cecilia. After they've run the gauntlet we've just explored, where did they end up?
I have an awesome job. I have like the most awesome job ever at the university. I'm a custodian. Because I work for the university, I also get a free college. So I'm also an anthropology student. So I chose anthropology because I don't see those things being solved through a lot of the traditional routes we think of, like social work or the legal system or those kind of things that we think would want to address it. So I like anthropology because it gives me a lens to look at like the conditions, the how and the whys and the whos.
Well, right now I'm currently housed. I've been housed through the Youth for Change 6th Street Center, which is a homeless center that helps people, you know, runaways and people ages like, I want to say it starts up, 14 all the way to 25. I have my own apartment. I'm doing really well. I pay my rent. I am in college for business administration, specialized in management. Right now I'm working on my AA. I graduate in the fall. Just a person out here just trying to survive, keep things going, and looking forward to the future.
Yeah, through my experience, I'm more wary to make assumptions, just because I myself was in foster care, and I know like being in foster care doesn't mean you were a bad kid, or like there sometimes there's just more to the story than you know. Same with drugs and like homeless, like you can't just know everyone's entire story by looking at them.
I got placed with my foster family as soon as I got put in foster care. They were my first family, and then the plan was to go back with my mom, and then after a year I finally felt comfortable enough to go spend the night with her, and she had hit me again. So I left, and I expressed that I didn't want to live with her. Like that I was going to fight in court to just stay in the foster system. And because like after 13 years of that's how you're parenting, that's not just drugs, that's a habit, and that's how you know how to parent. And I wasn't willing to be the punching bag of that.
Aria and Faith are living with foster families and are planning to go to college when they graduate from high school.
We are at the, they call it Genesis today, but this was the pallet house, the shelter, put together through the city of Chico, and many other agencies got involved with it. It is a place where we can come to be off the street, not be a burden on the community. I do want to know that people that do come to a facility like this know that they can get out of here and that the labels can be forgotten about them, because they are a person and they have something to offer to the community and they have something to share with others.
You know, this is like a little city in here, right? Where we can control the litter, we can control the people that's in here because we live in here. I'm more focused on just what I need to do and what I don't need to do, what I need not to do. Yeah.
I worked, I made my retirement. It's not much, but it'll pay my bills and then I'll get by.
But I mean, going from a tent and fighting the wind and in the tent and all that, and the rain, not having a heater, oh, this is plush.
I'm going to be here. There's not openings. It's pretty much a 3-year waiting list for low-income housing.
After I got into the pallets, it was April 26, 2022. It was the second day they opened. I was there for about a year. I got a job. Like, they didn't think I had a job, and I'm like, oh, I'm not wearing a Del Taco shirt because they're my favorite food place. I got a job, and then they were proud of me. They were like really proud of me. And Amber mentioned a place that she knew of that was coming up for rent. This happened so fast. She got a hold of me so that I got in here June, so about the end of May, she said, are you ready to move into your place? And it's affordable housing in it. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna get my hopes up. They'll call me. Well, they called me and they said they'd like to rent to me, and that was so cool. I got pictures of that. Shelly took my picture and Amber was so happy and went and signed my lease, and I got my keys and I could move in, and I just was like, I didn't think it was real. And the washer and dryer is really nice. You don't even realize how much you miss a washer and dryer. About a shower is about like, and it's nice to be able to pay my rent. I feel blessed. I feel appreciative. I'm forever grateful for it.
We're lucky to have what we have.
So, what became of the son Mark gave up? How did that turn out?
Him and his wife moved back to Chico, and they were living off of Eaton, and he just had his third son. He's married. And I think that's all fathers dream for their children, to just have a better life.